Look at number 1 here. Watch closer, regulate more. Watch closer, regulate more. No single federal agency or a single law governs this vast new world. Instead, there's a hodgepodge of regulations from the Food and Drug Administration, the United States Department of Agriculture, and the EPA. We need a new single agency of the government to bring order to this.
Because when systems don't meet, when they're out of balance or not in sync with one another, they can't be controlled centrally. And the goal of Agenda 21 is one world government and total control from a central unit.
I don't think I have to explain Agenda 21 to most of you in this audience. You know that in 1992, the United Nations created what it called a comprehensive blueprint to reorganize human society. Think of those words, reorganize human society. Social justice was the tool, environmental protection was the excuse. I've had many Greens come up to me and say, it doesn't matter how many rights you think you have, if you don't have a planet to stand on, what good are they going to do you? So that's the scare tactic that they have used to promote this program. And lots of people laughed at that idea, and they called it an impossible task. I call it a stupid task, reorganize human society. It called for the elimination of free markets and national sovereignty and independence, and the elimination of private property ownership. And it called for redistribution of wealth and a huge reduction in human populations.
America, the United States of America, is really under attack right now. We, in the United States, are, the U.S. landmass is about 2.5 times the size of Europe and has roughly half the population, just over half. That landmass is huge, and about 75% of the population lives in large cities. The goal is to move everyone out of the rural areas and into the large cities, and to destroy representative government, and to move it into to government by unelected boards and commissions. Now, here in the EU, of course, you've already moved to that position, where it's an erasure of jurisdictional boundaries, an erasure of national boundaries. And that is the goal, because, as Zbigniew Brzezinski said in 1995, you can't just impose globalization pell-mell as a total movement. You have to do it incrementally, and the way to do that is through regionalization.
Well, yeah, what we're facing here is fundamentally a change in the way our government operates. What Agenda 21 does is it brings in non-elected councils, regional governments, boards that you're facing in your local communities. And the reason I say Agenda 21 brings that in is because Agenda 21 was written by a horde of non-governmental organizations, the Nature Conservancy, the Sierra Club, groups like this, International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, or ICLEI, and then they made it their mission to bring it into the United States. And so you have them come into the federal government, help write programs and grant programs. Then you have them go into the state governments and surround the state legislators there and get them to accept those grants and write policies like creating comprehensive development plans, forcing communities to do that. Then they go into the communities and they surround your county commissioners, your city councilmen, and tell them, here are these grants, you need to get this, you need to do that. And so they forced it from the international level to UN down into your local community.
There are some non-governmental organizations like the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, the Audubon Society. These guys believe we need to reduce the human population by over 1 billion people. I've seen some of them say that the Earth can only sustain 250 million people. And every time I hear one of these guys advocate this, I say, you get in line first. We'll all follow you. I haven't found anybody yet who will.
And in Denmark, for instance, in Denmark, well, every nation that signed on to Agenda 21 has its local Agenda 21 plan. People in the United States are completely unaware of this. If I go out and talk about this, the United States press attacks me and calls me a conspiracy theorist, which is totally ridiculous. It is a conspiracy, but it's not a theory. It's a fact. Here in Europe, it's openly spoken about, local Agenda 21. And of course, here in Denmark, the Aalborg Principles, 1994, and then Aalborg Plus 10, 2004, was the European Roundtable for Local Agenda 21, was held here. And the principles are public-private partnerships, which is fascism. And this is how it's implemented on the ground, is through this joining together between corporations, non-governmental organizations, and governments in order to cut out the actual individual, your voter, and instead to take that to a level where we literally cannot penetrate. And this is the goal. So this is already far progressed in Europe.
But the UN and its army of non-governmental organizations, along with obedient government officials, were undaunted. As they pressed forward, they, of course, attacked anyone who spoke ill of their blueprint. They called us liars and conspiracy theorists. Want an example? Look in your program today and see what they called me. But they continued flooding governments at every level, pushing their unending flow of legislation, all designed to regulate nearly every human action. They put controls on how and where we can build our homes, controls on small farmers over the crops that they can grow and how they can grow them. And they impose controls on our own private transportation decisions. And quietly, step by step, Agenda 21 gained a foothold. Today, nobody's laughing.
And what they're doing is changing your government.
Tell me about that. What are we worried about? What are we concerned about? What are you worried that is changing that would be to the detriment of American citizens?
Well, the creation of planning boards, of water boards, of energy boards, of historic preservation boards, these are all appointed boards. And a lot of the people serving on those boards are part of these same NGO groups with these political agendas. When you, as a citizen in your community, try to say, hey, this regulation that you're putting on me is hurting me, it's hurting my property, hurting my job, whatever the case may be, they will refer you to this board. The board doesn't care what you think. And so you really don't have representative government anymore. You have a dictatorship that is essentially changing the very way the United States operates.
Agenda 21 policy can be found everywhere. Those stack and pack high-rises in smart growth communities, conservation easements in the rural areas, vast areas of the nation locked away from human use. This is Agenda 21. The issue is so vast, so overwhelming, that people rightfully have trouble wrapping their heads around it. It encompasses every aspect of our lives, from housing to jobs to education to health care to even gun control. We don't know where to go first. What do we start to fight? They have us so split up, but we don't know which direction to go in next. Now, in this age of sound bites, it's very difficult to, they tell us that people have an attention span of a gnat, and so you have to say everything in one or two words. I can't do a soundbite on Agenda 21 in one or two words, but I have done my best to break it down as to the easiest common denominator so you can understand what it is and what to do about it. Let me make it as simple as possible. There are three basic tactics that have been used to enforce it, put it on us. One is an attack, an all-out attack on private property ownership. Two is a change of our system of representative government to one of non-elected regional councils that take government farther from the people. Why do you have so much trouble fighting City Hall? Because your elected representatives are giving up their authority, and they're giving it to non-elected regional councils or water boards or whatever it may be, and you go to your city councilman and you say, I've got a problem with this, you have to go to the water board. Go to that guy, he doesn't care what you think. He's got his own agenda. And the third way that they're putting this in place, they're funding it all through the creation of federal grants that come with very specific strings attached, meaning enforcement of the policy of Agenda 21 or Sustainable Development. In 2015, the proponents of this hidden and much denied blueprint became even more aggressive, determined to finish the job. Quite frankly, they're worried because we have delayed them. We have begun to push back, and they are desperate to get this thing done. So they've gotten aggressive. Just over 3 months ago in New York City, a horde of international delegates, UN officials, NGO activists, heads of state, including Barack Obama and even the Pope, converged to reaffirm the existence of this monster in our future. Basically, the United Nations rebooted Agenda 21, giving it a new name. It is now the 2030 Agenda. And they came up with a new deadline to finish it. What is that? Oh, yeah, 2030. The 17 goals of the 2030 Agenda include details on controlling food supplies, corporate food factories over family farms. And you know, if you control the food, you control society.